Billionaire saw a black girl digging through trash for food. His next move changed her life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin our story. The cold wind swept across the street, biting at the exposed skin, and the city seemed to hum with the noise of the late-night traffic. A distant siren echoed through the alley as a black girl, no older than 10, bent over a pile of discarded food and wrappers in the corner of the parking lot behind a fancy restaurant. Her clothes were torn and patched up with whatever she could find, and her shoes, barely held together with frayed laces, tapped quietly against the cold concrete. Her hands, small and trembling, sifted through the remnants of a meal left behind by someone too rich to care. The smell of rotting food mixed with the scent of exhaust fumes from the cars that whizzed by. But to her, this was just another night. She didn't flinch as she picked up an apple core, wiped it on her sleeve, and took a small bite. A sound of footsteps approached, and for a moment, she froze, her wide eyes glancing up, nervous but used to being ignored. But this time, the footsteps didn't fade. A tall man in an expensive suit, his silver hair neatly combed, stood just a few feet away. He had just finished a long meeting with clients and was heading back to his luxury car when he saw her. His face tightened in disbelief as he watched her eat from the trash. His first instinct was to turn away, to ignore it like everyone else did, but something in the girl's posture stopped him. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just surviving. He stood there for a moment, too stunned to move, unsure of what to do next. The city's glow reflected off the windows of his sleek car, but the sight in front of him felt like a slap in the face. The girl looked up again, her eyes meeting his for a brief second, then quickly lowering to the food in her hands. Without a word, she went back to searching the trash. The billionaire's heart sank as he stood there, feeling a mix of anger and guilt well up inside him. His life had been filled with luxury, wealth, and power. Yet, here was a young girl, forced to scavenge for scraps, hidden from the world that he belonged to. He glanced at her again, the way she held her head down, the way her small hands worked tirelessly as if this was the only choice she had. He couldn't ignore it. The choice he had made, to ignore the poor, to look away, had been the easiest. But now, in front of him, was a person, a child, who deserved better than this. "Hey," he said, his voice uncertain, trying to break the silence. The girl flinched slightly, but didn't look up. "Why are you here?" he asked, taking a step closer, his voice gentler now. She hesitated, then whispered, "I'm just trying to find something to eat." His gaze softened, and without another word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill, handing it to her. "Here," he said. The girl looked at the bill, then back at him, her eyes full of suspicion. She shook her head slowly. "I don't need money," she said quietly. "I just need food." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He paused for a moment, processing what she had said, and then something inside him clicked. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. But this time it wasn't just an offer of money. It was a chance for something more, a chance for change. The girl hesitated, unsure whether to trust him, but there was something in his eyes, something real, that made her take a step forward. This was a night that would change her life forever, and it all started with one simple choice: to stop, to see, and to act. The girl stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to trust the hand that had been extended to her. She had learned long ago that people like him, people with money, power, and everything she would never have, weren't to be trusted. But there was something different about him. His eyes weren't filled with judgment. Instead, there was a softness in them, a genuine concern that she couldn't ignore. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face again, as if searching for any sign that he might be playing some cruel game. But he wasn't. The faintest hint of a smile crept across his lips, and she found herself slowly, tentatively, reaching out. His fingers were warm as he took her hand, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a strange sense of comfort. He didn't pull her along forcefully, but gently led her toward the sleek black car parked nearby. The wind had picked up again, the air now biting with an even sharper chill, but she didn't mind. She felt the warmth of his touch as he helped her into the car, the soft leather seats a stark contrast to the rough streets she was used to. Inside the car, the heat enveloped her, and she looked out the window, watching the city pass by. It seemed like a completely different world, one that was so far removed from the alleyways and garbage she was used to scavenging. She glanced back at him. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm taking you to get some real food," he said with a small smile. "You haven't eaten yet, have you?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice to answer. It was like a dream. She could hardly remember the last time she had eaten something that wasn't leftover scraps or food from a charity kitchen. Her stomach rumbled at the thought of a warm meal, but she didn't want to get her hopes up. He was just being kind, but that didn't mean he was going to do anything more for her. They arrived at a small, cozy diner on the outskirts of the city. The warm glow of the lights inside made it look inviting, and as they stepped out of the car, the smell of fresh food hit her nose. It was the kind of smell that made her stomach growl louder, but she didn't want to seem too eager. As they walked inside, the waitress greeted them with a smile, and the billionaire guided her to a booth in the corner. "Order whatever you want," he said as he slid into the booth across from her. She stared at the menu for a moment, her eyes scanning the options, but nothing seemed real. Everything looked so good, so unattainable. She had never been able to afford a proper meal like this before. She swallowed, trying to shake off the discomfort. "I don't know what to get," she said, her voice barely audible. He smiled, leaning back in his seat. "Then let me decide for you." He signaled to the waitress, who quickly returned to take their order. "Two of everything," he said, his tone light but commanding. The waitress looked at him in surprise, but nodded and quickly went off to the kitchen. She turned to the girl, who was still staring at the menu. "Is it always this easy for you?" she asked softly, unsure of how to phrase the question. He met her gaze, his expression thoughtful. "No," he said quietly. "It's not always easy. But sometimes, you have to make a choice to help someone, even if it's a small thing. It makes a difference." The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, the girl felt a glimmer of something in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite identify, but one that felt almost like hope. It had been so long since she had felt anything like that. The meal came, and as the plates were set down in front of them, the girl's eyes widened. She couldn't remember the last time she had been given so much food. The smell of fresh bread, sizzling eggs, bacon, and warm pancakes made her mouth water. She took a tentative bite, then another, and soon enough, she was eating with a hunger she hadn't realized she had been holding back for so long. As she ate, she noticed the billionaire watching her. There was no judgment in his gaze, just an understanding, as if he knew what it felt like to be hungry, to be invisible. She finally looked up from her plate, meeting his eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice trembling a little. "Because I can," he said simply. "And because everyone deserves a chance to eat, to feel safe, to have a future. No one should have to live like you have." She looked down at her food, chewing slowly, trying to absorb his words. It was hard to believe someone could care that much. People like him didn't usually care about people like her. But as she sat there, eating in the warmth of the diner, with the smell of real food filling her senses, she began to believe it, just a little. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was worth something more than the scraps she had been collecting from the trash. The billionaire's words echoed in her mind, and a new feeling stirred within her, one that had been buried deep for so long. Hope. I was sitting in the diner, staring at the plate in front of me, still trying to wrap my mind around the events of the past few hours. I had gone from digging through trash behind a restaurant, starving and invisible, to sitting in a warm, cozy diner, eating real food for the first time in what felt like forever. My stomach was full, my hands no longer trembling from hunger, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't real. This man, this billionaire, had come out of nowhere. Why did he stop? Why did he help me? As I continued to eat, my thoughts were a tangled mess. My mind kept telling me not to get attached, not to get hopeful. I had been let down before, by so many people who had come into my life, only to leave once they got bored or tired of helping. I didn't want to be another person he'd pity and forget. The man, he didn't seem like a pitying kind of person, though. He hadn't looked at me with sympathy or condescension. Instead, he had treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something, even though I had nothing to give him in return. "You're quiet," he said, pulling me from my thoughts. He was watching me carefully, as if he could sense my hesitation. I put down my fork and met his eyes. "I'm just thinking," I said, not sure what else to say. He nodded, understanding. "You've had a rough life," he said, his voice softer now. "But you've got strength in you. I can see that." I almost choked on my food. I wasn't used to hearing things like that. People usually called me weak, helpless, pathetic. But here he was, a stranger, saying I was strong. I looked down at my hands, unsure of how to respond. He sat back, leaning against the booth, studying me with those calm, intelligent eyes. "You've got more potential than you think," he continued. "You don't have to live the way you've been living. You can have more than this. You deserve more than this." His words hit me like a wave, pulling me under. It was like he was offering me a chance to rewrite my life, to change everything. But was it that simple? I had spent years surviving, making do with whatever I could find, with whoever would let me stay the night. There were no chances, no opportunities. There was just survival. "I don't know if I can do that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've never had a chance. I don't even know what it would look like to have one." He smiled gently, as if he understood. "I'm offering you a chance right now. No more surviving. No more digging through trash. I can help you. I want to help you. But you have to want it, too." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. His words were both a lifeline and a burden. What would I have to give up to take that chance? What would I lose if I let him help me? I had been alone for so long, relied on no one but myself. Trusting him would mean giving up control, giving up everything I had built to protect myself. But something inside me wanted to believe him. Something inside me wanted to believe that there was more to life than the endless struggle. "What do you want from me?" I asked, looking at him, trying to gauge his intentions. "Nothing," he said, his voice firm. "I don't want anything from you. I just want to help. I can't make your past go away, but I can give you a future. A better one." I looked down at the table, at the half-empty plate in front of me. His words felt too big, too impossible. I had spent so many years just trying to get by, that the idea of a future, of something more, felt foreign. But he was right. I did want more. I wanted something different. I wanted to feel safe, to not have to worry about where my next meal was coming from, or if I would have a place to sleep that night. I wanted to believe that I was worthy of something better. "Okay," I said, my voice shaky. "Okay, I'll take the chance." He smiled again, this time with a warmth that made something in my chest flutter. "Good," he said. "You won't regret it. I promise." As I finished my meal, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope inside me. It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. I sat back in the booth, staring out the window at the city beyond. The lights, the cars, the bustle of life, it all seemed so far away. It was hard to wrap my mind around what had just happened. One moment, I was digging through trash, hungry and invisible, and the next, I was sitting in a warm diner with a billionaire offering me a chance at something more. My stomach was full, but my mind was racing. Could I really take that chance? Could I trust him? He had been kind, but kindness from someone like him was a rare thing. People like him didn't usually look down and see people like me. People like me were just a footnote, a passing moment, something to be ignored. But not him. He had actually stopped. He had looked. I had never been seen like that before. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was about to come next, but for the first time, I felt like maybe I had a chance. The billionaire's voice cut through my thoughts. "So," he said, his voice steady and calm, "what do you want to do next?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The words seemed foreign in my mouth. I had never been asked what I wanted before. People had always told me what to do, or just left me to figure it out on my own. But now, here he was, asking me what I wanted. "I don't know," I said, the words coming out softer than I intended. "I never really had a choice before." He nodded, his eyes understanding. "Well, now you do. You don't have to keep doing this. You don't have to keep fighting just to survive. You can choose something else." It sounded too good to be true. There had to be a catch. There always was. "What do you expect from me?" I asked, my voice full of doubt. "I don't expect anything," he said, his gaze steady. "I just want to help you. But you have to help yourself, too. I can't do it for you." I looked down at the table, my fingers picking at the edge of my napkin. It wasn't that I didn't want to change. It wasn't that I didn't want a different life. It was that I didn't know how to start. I had spent so many years just getting by, just surviving, that I had forgotten what it was like to hope. But now, for the first time, the possibility of something different was within reach. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I didn't have to keep living this way. The thought of it scared me, but it also excited me. I want to go to school, I said, surprising myself with the words. I hadn't even thought about it until that moment. I want to learn. I want a future. The billionaire's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked at me with something like pride. That's a good start, he said. We'll make that happen. But there's more to it than that. You have to learn how to trust again, to believe that you're worth it. You have to believe that you deserve more than just scraps from the trash. I nodded, my throat tight. It was hard to say the words out loud, to admit to myself that I had been living a life of survival, not living. I'll try, I said quietly. I'll try to believe it. He smiled, and it was the first time I had seen him truly smile. That's all I'm asking. We'll take it one step at a time. We sat there for a while, the sound of the diner around us fading into the background. The food was gone, but I still felt a strange warmth inside me. It wasn't just from the meal. It was the feeling that, for the first time, someone believed in me. The thought was almost overwhelming. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The billionaire, whose name I learned was Ethan, took me to see a counselor, helped me get enrolled in a school nearby, and even arranged for a tutor to help me catch up. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I doubted myself. But each time I felt like giving up, I thought about the promise I had made to myself, that I would change. Slowly but surely, I began to see the world differently. I started to believe that I could be something more than just the girl who dug through trash for food. School wasn't easy, but it was exciting. I was learning things I never thought I would understand. I had never been taught how to think, how to believe in myself, but now, I was beginning to learn. Ethan was there every step of the way, not just with financial support, but with emotional support, too. He pushed me to be better, to believe that I had something to offer. And little by little, I started to believe him. But even as I grew stronger, doubts still crept into my mind. Was I really worth all of this? Was I really deserving of the life he was giving me? I couldn't help but wonder if it was all too good to be true. One evening, as I was sitting in my room, working on my homework, Ethan came in and sat down beside me. You're doing great, he said, his voice gentle but firm. But I can see that you're still holding back. What are you afraid of? I looked down at my papers, unable to meet his gaze. I'm afraid that one day, you'll see that I'm not worth it, I admitted. I'm afraid you'll realize that I'm just someone who digs through trash for food, and that you'll give up on me. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. You're worth more than you know. And you don't have to prove that to anyone, least of all me. You're enough just as you are. I felt my heart swell at his words, but the fear still lingered. How could I believe that? How could I trust that someone like him would never give up on me? But as I looked at him, sitting there beside me, I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to do this alone. Maybe I didn't have to carry the weight of my past by myself. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I was worthy of a better life. Maybe I was worth the chance to change. I had been living with Ethan for a few months now, and things were changing in ways I never thought possible. The house, the food, the warmth, the kindness. It was all so new, so unfamiliar. I still couldn't shake the feeling that it was all a dream, that one day I would wake up and find myself back on the streets, digging through trash again. But every day, that fear grew a little smaller. Ethan was different from anyone I had ever met. He never treated me like a charity case. He never made me feel inferior or like I didn't belong. He treated me with respect, like I was worth something. It was hard to believe at first, but I was starting to believe him. School was going better, too. I had a tutor, and though I still struggled with some subjects, I was learning. I was catching up. It felt like a small victory every time I understood something I had never known before. But even as I grew, even as I began to believe in myself, I couldn't stop worrying about one thing: the past. What if the world found out where I came from? What if people knew I used to dig through the trash just to survive? What if they knew I didn't belong in a place like this, in a house like Ethan's? What if I wasn't enough? One afternoon, Ethan called me into the living room. He was sitting on the couch, his laptop open in front of him. I could tell he was working, but when he saw me, he closed the laptop and gave me his full attention. How's school going? He asked, his voice warm and inviting. I nodded, trying to keep the nerves out of my voice. It's okay. I'm getting the hang of it. He smiled, proud of me. You're doing great, he said. But I want to ask you something. There's a new opportunity I want to talk to you about. I felt my heart rate pick up. What did he mean by new opportunity? Was it some kind of test? I had grown used to him giving me challenges, but this felt different. What kind of opportunity? I asked, my voice a little shaky. He leaned back in the couch, his eyes thoughtful. There's a program that offers scholarships to students. In your position, he explained. It's an intensive program, but it could change everything for you. It could give you access to better education, opportunities for your future. My stomach twisted with nerves. What do you mean by better? What kind of program is this? Ethan's eyes softened, and I could see the care in them. It's a chance to get into a good college, to start building a future that doesn't involve just scraping by. You have the potential, you just need to take the first step. I looked down, overwhelmed by his words. A good college? Me? I had never even thought about college. The thought of it was so far beyond what I had ever imagined for myself. But now that he said it, now that the words were out in the air, I couldn't help but wonder. Could this be real? Could I really have a future that didn't involve surviving? Could I be someone other than the girl who lived on the streets, who ate from the trash? My hands trembled as I fidgeted with the hem of my sleeve. I had never been given a chance like this before. I had never had anyone offer me something beyond just getting by. It was tempting, but it was also terrifying. What if I don't make it? What if I fail? I asked, the fear in my voice impossible to hide. Ethan smiled again, his eyes full of reassurance. You don't have to be perfect, he said softly. You just have to try. I'll be here to help you every step of the way. But you have to decide if you want this for yourself. I stared at him for a long time, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Could I do this? Could I take this chance, this leap into a future that felt so uncertain? The fear was still there, gnawing at me, but a part of me, a small part, wanted to try. I wanted to see what it felt like to not just survive, but to live, to actually have a chance. I'll do it, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll try. I'll take the chance. Ethan's face lit up with a smile that made my heart feel a little lighter. I'm proud of you, he said. This is just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan helped me fill out the applications for the scholarship program, and I started working with a mentor to improve my grades and prepare for the next steps. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up, when the fear of failure seemed too much to bear. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered Ethan's words. You just have to try. Slowly, the fear started to turn into determination. I began to believe in the possibility of a different life, a life where I wasn't defined by my past. I was more than the girl who dug through trash. I was more than the girl who had been invisible to the world. I was someone who deserved a chance. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like I had a shot at something better, and that was enough. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window, the morning light streaming in through the curtains. It was a typical Sunday, but everything about it felt different. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about where I would sleep or what I would eat. I didn't have to plan my next move to survive the day. I had a bed, a roof over my head, and a chance to change my future. The room was still quiet, the calm before the usual rush of the house starting. Ethan had left for a meeting early that morning, but I could feel his presence in the house even when he wasn't here. His kindness, his words, were always with me now, guiding me through this new chapter in my life. I stretched and rubbed my eyes, taking a moment to just let the peace of the morning sink in. The thought of school came next, and while the idea of school had once been terrifying, it now seemed like an opportunity, a chance to prove to myself that I could be more than the girl who dug through trash. I had never had the chance to be a student, to learn without fear of where my next meal was coming from. But now I did. I got up and dressed quickly, ready to face the day. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. The house was quiet as I moved through the kitchen, making myself a simple breakfast. I thought about how things had changed since the day I met Ethan. Everything felt surreal at times. It was hard to believe I had come from the streets, from surviving on scraps, to having this opportunity. But I couldn't waste it. I couldn't let fear hold me back. I ate quickly and grabbed my books, ready for another day of learning. It was going to be another busy day, with studying, homework, and the challenge of keeping up in school. I had a lot to catch up on, but I had learned not to back down from a challenge. I walked out to the front door and noticed the luxury car parked in the driveway. The same car that Ethan drove every day. It had once been a symbol of a world that was so far from mine, but now, it was just part of my new reality. I had to admit, it still felt strange to be living this life. But it was mine now, and I had to make the most of it. I walked to the car and got in, heading off to school. As I sat in the back seat, I thought about what Ethan had told me about trust. He had said that to truly move forward, I had to trust not just him, but myself. Trust that I was capable, that I deserved this new life. It wasn't easy, but each day I tried to believe it more. School was difficult, but it wasn't impossible. My teachers were understanding, and the other students were more welcoming than I had expected. Still, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, like I didn't belong in this world. But I had to push through that feeling. I couldn't let my past define me. As the school day went on, I found myself growing more confident. I participated in class, answered questions, and even made a few friends. They weren't the kind of friends I had back on the streets. These were kids who had the luxury of worrying about things like homework and their phones, not where their next meal would come from. But they treated me with respect, and that was something new for me. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had made it through another day, and it had been better than the last. I was learning, I was fitting in, and I was beginning to realize that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Ethan picked me up after school, as usual. He greeted me with a smile, and I couldn't help but smile back. "How was your day?" he asked, his eyes warm with genuine curiosity. "It was good," I said, surprising myself. "I made some progress today. I'm starting to catch up." He nodded, clearly pleased. "I knew you could do it," he said. "You're stronger than you think." As we drove home, I looked out the window, thinking about how far I had come. From the streets to this, to a home, to a future. It felt like a dream, and yet it was becoming my reality. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to keep going. I was going to keep fighting for this life, for this chance. I didn't know what I would become, but I knew I was going to be someone worth believing in. I didn't just want to change my future. I wanted to change the way I saw myself. I wasn't the girl who dug through trash anymore. I was someone who had a chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. When we arrived back at the house, Ethan looked at me and smiled. "You did great today," he said. "I'm proud of you." For the first time in a long time, I smiled back, truly believing that maybe, just maybe, I was on the right path. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was starting to feel like I belonged. Every day, I woke up to a routine, to a life I had never imagined I could have. I had my own room, my own desk, and most importantly, I had hope. I had started to believe that I could do more than just survive. I could actually thrive. But even as my life started to change, there were things I hadn't told Ethan. Things that still haunted me. I had kept my past hidden from him. The painful memories I didn't want to relive. But sometimes, the past has a way of catching up with you. It had been a couple of months since I had moved in with him, and I was doing well in school. I was adjusting to the new life he had given me. But there were still moments when I would feel that nagging doubt creeping in. I had been on my own for so long. I had learned to rely on myself. Letting someone in, trusting them, was harder than I had imagined. Ethan was patient with me. He never pushed me to talk about my past, never asked too many questions. But I could see the concern in his eyes sometimes, especially when I would retreat into myself after a tough day at school. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. It was just that the weight of everything I had been through was still with me, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of it. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, doing my homework, Ethan came in and sat down next to me. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me quietly. I could feel the tension in the air, and I knew he was waiting for me to speak. "You're doing great," he finally said, his voice calm. "But I can tell something's still bothering you. You don't have to carry everything alone, you know." I glanced up at him, unsure of how to respond. His words had hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him everything, but part of me was still scared. What if he couldn't look at me the same way after hearing what I had been through? What if he thought I was too broken to be fixed? "I'm not used to this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Having someone care. I've been alone for so long, I don't know how to trust." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "I get it," he said. "It's not easy to let go of the past, but you don't have to do it all at once. Take your time." But remember, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here. His words were like a balm to my soul, soothing a wound I hadn't even realized was still there. But even as I nodded in response, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing. I hadn't told him the whole truth. I hadn't told him about my mother, or about the years I had spent bouncing from shelter to shelter, trying to survive. I hadn't told him about the abuse I had witnessed, the fear that had followed me everywhere I went. I hadn't told him how I had learned to close myself off from everyone, to never trust anyone but myself. The past was a shadow that I couldn't seem to escape, and it made me feel small, invisible. I knew I had to face it eventually. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't exist. But how could I tell Ethan? Would he still want to help me if he knew the whole story? As the days passed, I kept thinking about the conversation we had had. I could feel the weight of my secrets pressing down on me, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to share them. But one night, something happened that made me realize I couldn't keep hiding. I was at school, working late on a project, when a familiar face walked past me in the hallway. It was Clara, Ethan's sister. I had met her a few times before, but we hadn't really spoken much. She was always busy, always in a hurry. But that night, she stopped. "Hey," she said, her voice warm. "How's everything going?" I looked at her, unsure of how to answer. It was hard to explain how I was feeling, how I was still struggling to fit in, still holding on to pieces of the past that wouldn't let go. "It's good," I said, forcing a smile. "Everything's good." She didn't seem convinced. She studied me for a moment before speaking again. "You know, you don't have to pretend with me," she said gently. "I know what it's like to be the new person, to feel like you don't belong. But you do belong here. And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Her words caught me off guard. I had never had anyone offer to listen to me without judgment. I had never had someone give me the space to be vulnerable. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I had thought. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. I nodded, grateful for her kindness. "Thanks," I said quietly. "I appreciate it." As I walked home that night, I thought about Clara's words. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a place, like I was part of something. But I still had a long way to go. I still had to face the past, to let go of the fear that had kept me hidden for so long. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to trust again. But for now, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to try. I was starting to feel like I belonged. Every day, I woke up to a routine, to a life I had never imagined I could have. I had my own room, my own desk, and most importantly, I had hope. I had started to believe that I could do more than just survive. I could actually thrive. But even as my life started to change, there were things I hadn't told Ethan. Things that still haunted me. I had kept my past hidden from him, the painful memories I didn't want to relive. But sometimes, the past has a way of catching up with you. It had been a couple of months since I had moved in with him, and I was doing well in school. I was adjusting to the new life he had given me. But there were still moments when I would feel that nagging doubt creeping in. I had been on my own for so long. I had learned to rely on myself. Letting someone in, trusting them, was harder than I had imagined. Ethan was patient with me. He never pushed me to talk about my past, never asked too many questions. But I could see the concern in his eyes sometimes, especially when I would retreat into myself after a tough day at school. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. It was just that the weight of everything I had been through was still with me, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of it. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, doing my homework, Ethan came in and sat down next to me. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me quietly. I could feel the tension in the air, and I knew he was waiting for me to speak. "You're doing great," he finally said, his voice calm. "But I can tell something's still bothering you. You don't have to carry everything alone, you know." I glanced up at him, unsure of how to respond. His words had hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him everything, but part of me was still scared. What if he couldn't look at me the same way after hearing what I had been through? What if he thought I was too broken to be fixed? "I'm not used to this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Having someone care. I've been alone for so long, I don't know how to trust." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "I get it," he said. "It's not easy to let go of the past. But you don't have to do it all at once. Take your time. But remember, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here." His words were like a balm to my soul, soothing a wound I hadn't even realized was still there. But even as I nodded in response, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing. I hadn't told him the whole truth. I hadn't told him about my mother, or about the years I had spent bouncing from shelter to shelter, trying to survive. I hadn't told him about the abuse I had witnessed, the fear that had followed me everywhere I went. I hadn't told him how I had learned to close myself off from everyone, to never trust anyone but myself. The past was a shadow that I couldn't seem to escape, and it made me feel small, invisible. I knew I had to face it eventually. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't exist. But how could I tell Ethan? Would he still want to help me if he knew the whole story? As the days passed, I kept thinking about the conversation we had had. I could feel the weight of my secrets pressing down on me, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to share them. But one night, something happened that made me realize I couldn't keep hiding. I was at school, working late on a project, when a familiar face walked past me in the hallway. It was Clara, Ethan's sister. I had met her a few times before, but we hadn't really spoken much. She was always busy, always in a hurry. But that night, she stopped. "Hey," she said, her voice warm. "How's everything going?" I looked at her, unsure of how to answer. It was hard to explain how I was feeling, how I was still struggling to fit in, still holding on to pieces of the past that wouldn't let go. "It's good," I said, forcing a smile. "Everything's good." She didn't seem convinced. She studied me for a moment before speaking again. "You know, you don't have to pretend with me," she said gently. "I know what it's like to be the new person, to feel like you don't belong. But you do belong here. And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Her words caught me off guard. I had never had anyone offer to listen to me without judgment. I had never had someone give me the space to be vulnerable. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I had thought. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. I nodded, grateful for her kindness. "Thanks," I said quietly. "I appreciate it." As I walked home that night, I thought about Clara's words. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a place, like I was part of something. But I still had a long way to go. I still had to face the past, to let go of the fear that had kept me hidden for so long. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to trust again. But for now, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to try. I stood there, trying to steady my breath as the quiet of the room wrapped itself around me. The events of the past few days had been a blur, moments of chaos followed by quiet, lingering hope. But now, standing in front of Ethan's hospital bed, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. It wasn't just about him waking up. It wasn't just about the injuries he had sustained, or the guilt that gnawed at my insides. It was about what came next. What was I supposed to do? I had already made a promise to myself. I would protect him, no matter what. But the question still lingered. Could I really keep that promise? Ethan had been in and out of consciousness for the past few hours, his condition stable, but still critical. The doctors said he needed rest. But I wasn't sure if I could rest, not with the truth about what had happened to him still hanging in the air. As I watched him, his face pale under the harsh hospital lights, my mind kept going back to that night, back to the moment I had found him. The blood, the way his body had been limp in my arms. I had never felt so helpless. And yet, now, here I was, with a chance to help him, to give him a future. But there was a fear that I hadn't anticipated. What if I couldn't do it? What if I wasn't enough? The door to the room opened, and I looked up to see a nurse standing in the doorway. She smiled softly at me before speaking. "Mr. Bennett, we've checked his vitals again. He's still stable. He'll need a few more hours before we can give you a better update." I nodded, unable to find the words to respond. It wasn't the nurse's fault. She was just doing her job. But every word, every gesture, felt like a reminder of how out of control I had become, how little I could do to change things. The nurse left quietly, and the room fell into silence again. I couldn't stand the stillness. I stood up, walking over to the window. Outside, the city was alive, its lights twinkling against the night sky. But here, in this sterile room, everything felt frozen. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, trying to find something to hold on to. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. I turned to see Anna standing in the doorway, her small figure illuminated by the harsh light from the hallway. She had been at the hospital with me earlier, but I hadn't expected to see her again so soon. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could see the uncertainty in her gaze. She had been through so much already. I had seen it in her eyes the moment we met. The way she had stood beside Ethan without hesitation. the way she had refused to leave him. "How is he?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed, trying to force the words out. He's stable, but it's going to take time." She nodded, her eyes flickering to Ethan's still form on the bed. "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to help him. I've never been in a situation like this before." Anna stepped closer, her small hand reaching out to touch my arm. Her touch was gentle, but it held an unexpected weight. "You're doing everything you can," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "You're here. That's enough." I looked at her, the sincerity in her words catching me off guard. "I don't know how you can say that," I replied softly. "I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I feel like I should be doing more, but I don't know how." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes, just being there is all someone needs." I felt a lump form in my throat. How could she be so sure? How could she have so much faith, when everything in her life seemed to have been a struggle? But there was something about her words that comforted me. Something about the way she said it, as if she had learned it the hard way. As if she understood what it meant to fight for something, even when it seemed impossible. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I was enough, that being here for Ethan was enough. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed him somehow. That if I had been there sooner, if I had paid more attention, maybe things would have turned out differently. But what was done, and now, I had to figure out how to move forward. I turned back to the window, looking out at the city once more. It felt like a world away. But I wasn't alone anymore. Anna was here with me. And somehow, that small act of kindness, her quiet presence, made everything seem a little less overwhelming. Maybe she was right. Maybe just being here, just showing up, was enough. I didn't have all the answers, but I had her. And maybe that was all I needed. The sound of the door opening again pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see the nurse returning, this time with a doctor in tow. "Mr. Bennett, we need to talk about Ethan's recovery," the doctor said, his voice calm but serious. I nodded, my heart rate picking up. This was the moment I had been dreading. But I was ready. For once, I felt like I was ready to face whatever came next. I stood in the hospital hallway, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The doctor's words still echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. "We'll do everything we can, but his condition is still very critical." The weight of those words pressed down on me, suffocating me in a way I couldn't describe. Ethan was lying in that room, still unconscious, his life hanging by a thread. I had promised to protect him, to be there for him. But now, I felt more powerless than ever. I leaned my back against the cool wall, trying to steady myself. The hospital felt cold, sterile, a place where lives were saved, but also where hope sometimes withered. I closed my eyes, trying to picture something warm. Anything to pull me from the overwhelming fear that gripped me. I wanted to believe that Ethan would pull through, that somehow, everything would be okay. But the uncertainty gnawed at me. What if it didn't? What if I couldn't keep my promise? Just then, I felt a small hand on my shoulder. I opened my eyes to see Anna standing beside me, her face full of concern. She had been here for hours, quietly sitting by Ethan's side, never leaving. Her small frame looked so fragile in this setting, but in a way, she was stronger than I was. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed myself. I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted. "I'm scared, Anna. What if I can't help him?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. "You're already helping him," she said, her voice steady. "You're here. That's all he needs." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was still so much fear inside me. Fear that I wasn't enough, that maybe I had made a mistake in thinking I could be the one to save him. Anna's words, though, had a calming effect. She had a way of speaking with such certainty, as if the world was simpler than it seemed. She stepped closer to me, her hand still on my shoulder. "When I was younger, I was scared all the time," she continued, her voice soft but full of wisdom beyond her years. "But I realized that sometimes, being scared doesn't mean you can't be strong. It just means you have to try, even when it feels impossible." I looked at her, her face filled with the quiet strength I had always admired. "How do you do it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "How do you stay so strong when everything feels like it's falling apart?" Anna smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I don't always feel strong," she said. "But I know that people need me. and that's enough to keep going. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. Anna had been through so much, and yet here she was, offering me comfort. She had a way of seeing things that I could never fully understand, but it gave me hope. If she could survive, if she could keep going despite everything she had been through, then maybe I could, too. Thank you, I said quietly, my voice thick with gratitude. You don't know how much that means to me. She gave me a small nod, then turned her gaze toward Ethan's room. He's going to make it, she said, her voice full of conviction. You just have to believe it too. I followed her gaze, my heart tightening as I thought about Ethan lying in that room, fighting for his life. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be days where it felt like everything was falling apart. But Anna was right. I had to believe. I had to hold on to hope. Just then, a nurse appeared in the hallway, interrupting the moment. Mr. Bennett? She asked, her voice calm but urgent. We're moving Ethan to a more stable unit. His condition has improved slightly. My heart leaped in my chest, a wave of relief flooding over me. He's okay? I asked, almost afraid to hope. He's still critical, but we're cautiously optimistic, the nurse replied, offering me a reassuring smile. We'll keep you updated. As the nurse walked away, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I hadn't even realized I had been holding my breath. It's going to be okay, Anna said, her voice full of quiet confidence. I nodded, my throat tight. Maybe, just maybe, she was right. Ethan wasn't out of the woods yet, but he was still here. And as long as he was still fighting, so would I. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight on my shoulders lighten just a little. We were in this together. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't alone. I had Anna by my side, and that gave me strength. I turned to her, offering her a smile, and she smiled back, her eyes bright with the same quiet hope that had kept her going all this time. Together, we could face whatever came next. I sat by Ethan's bed, staring at him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The doctors had said he was out of immediate danger, but his recovery was still uncertain. It felt like I was caught in a space between two realities, the one where he was still in critical condition, and the one where he woke up and everything went back to normal. I didn't know which version to hope for. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. I looked up to see Anna standing in the doorway, her face slightly flushed from running through the hospital hallways. She had been coming and going for hours, barely leaving Ethan's side. She gave me a small smile, though I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. How's he doing? She asked, her voice quiet, as if not wanting to disturb the fragile silence that hung in the room. Still the same, I replied softly. Stable, but it's going to take time. She nodded and walked over to the chair beside the bed, sitting down without saying anything else. I didn't need to explain more. She understood. We had both been in this for so long, battling against the unknown, clinging to the small threads of hope that we could make it through. She reached out, placing her hand gently on Ethan's, her fingers brushing against his cold skin. She didn't look up at me. You're doing everything you can, she said after a long silence. He knows that. I nodded, though her words didn't seem to ease the tightness in my chest. I wanted to believe her, but doubt kept creeping in. I wasn't sure what would happen if he didn't wake up. What if we had already done all we could, and it wasn't enough? My mind wandered back to the night of the accident, the way I had found Ethan on the street, barely conscious, bleeding. I hadn't even thought about how dangerous it was to carry him, to take him to the hospital. I had just acted. But now, I wondered if I had missed something, if there had been something I should have done differently. Anna squeezed my hand gently, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. You didn't miss anything, she said, her voice steady. Sometimes, we just have to trust the people around us. We can't control everything. I looked at her, surprised by her calm demeanor. Anna had been through more than I could imagine, yet she had this quiet strength about her, a way of reassuring people without saying much. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to trust the process, to trust that things would be okay, but the fear of losing Ethan held me tightly, and I couldn't let go. As if sensing my thoughts, Anna stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The city lights twinkled below, but up here in the hospital, everything felt cold and distant. I know you're scared, she said softly, her back to me. But if you believe in him, if you really believe he's going to make it, then that's the first step. You can't let fear win. Her words struck a chord within me, and I felt a wave of emotion rush through me. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had been trying to control, trying to fix. But she was right. I couldn't keep letting fear control my actions. I had to believe in Ethan, in his strength. I had to trust that he would fight through this, that we would both make it through. The room was silent for a long time after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a peaceful silence, one filled with the kind of understanding that needed no words. As I sat there with Anna, watching the sky darken outside, I realized something. I had been so focused on the outcome, so terrified of what might happen, that I had forgotten to live in the moment. I had forgotten that I was here for Ethan, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who believed in him, someone who would be there, no matter what. Ethan had already shown me his strength, and now it was my turn to show him mine. I was ready to face whatever came next. I could do this. Together, we could do this. The door opened again, and I turned to see the nurse stepping inside. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her expression unreadable. "We have some news about Ethan's condition." My heart skipped a beat. "Is he?" I couldn't finish the sentence. The nurse hesitated for a moment, then gave a small smile. "He's starting to wake up," she said softly. "It's slow, but it's progress." My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek before I could stop it. Anna turned to me, her eyes wide with hope. "He's going to be okay," she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight in my chest had lifted, just a little, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to hope again. I sat by the hospital bed, my eyes fixed on Ethan's face, watching for any sign that he was truly awake. The doctor had been right. He was making progress, but it was slow and unpredictable. His eyelids fluttered every now and then, but he hadn't fully opened his eyes yet, not in a way that said he was conscious. I felt my heartbeat quicken every time there was a movement, a slight shift in his posture. I had become obsessed with every small sign, as if waiting for a miracle to happen. The room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Anna sat beside me, her presence calm, as always. She hadn't said much since the nurse had informed us of Ethan's small, but significant progress. She didn't need to. Her quiet faith in Ethan was enough to fill the room. I could see her glancing at him from time to time, her expression thoughtful, as if she knew something I didn't. She had been through her own battles, yet somehow, she seemed to know how to face them with a grace I envied. But me? I was still trying to figure out how to breathe, how to be the person I needed to be for Ethan. And for Anna. The door creaked open softly, and the sound pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see the nurse enter, her face soft but serious. She walked up to the bed, checking the machines and adjusting the foredrip. I watched her closely, hoping for any new information. After what felt like an eternity, she turned toward me. "Mr. Bennett, we've seen some positive signs," she said quietly. "Ethan is starting to respond more. He's not fully conscious yet, but he's aware of his surroundings." My heart skipped a beat, and I could feel the tension in my chest ease just a little. "What do you mean, aware?" I asked, my voice shaky. The nurse smiled, though it was brief. "His eyes are reacting to light, and he's been moving his fingers. Small movements, but they're there. We're encouraged, but we still have to take things one step at a time." I nodded, absorbing the information, but still feeling a weight in my chest. It wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed him to wake up. I needed to know that he was going to be okay. I looked at Anna, and she gave me a small, encouraging smile. "That's good news," she said softly. "He's fighting." I nodded, but the doubt in my mind lingered. What if it's not enough? I whispered, mostly to myself. Anna reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her touch was warm and steady. "You've done everything you can," she said. "You've given him the chance to fight. Now, we just have to wait and believe." I squeezed her hand, grateful for her reassurance. It was so easy to get lost in the fear, to let the uncertainty consume me, but Anna was right. I had done everything I could. The rest was up to Ethan. He was the one fighting now. The nurse glanced at the clock before looking back at us. "I'll let you know as soon as there's any change. For now, just stay with him. He can hear you, even if he can't respond yet." I nodded again, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I stayed there, beside Ethan's bed, watching him, waiting. The minutes stretched into hours, but I didn't move. I couldn't. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about us, about the bond we were forming, about the promise I had made to him. I didn't know how long we sat there. Time seemed to blur, the world outside the hospital fading into the background. But eventually, I noticed a change. Ethan's hand twitched. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Ethan," I whispered, leaning closer, my voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" His fingers twitched again, this time with more strength, as if responding to my voice. My heart raced, and I looked over at Anna, who was watching with wide eyes. Slowly, Ethan's eyes opened. They were blurry at first, unfocused, but as his gaze landed on me, they began to clear. I could see recognition in them. My breath caught in my throat. "Ethan," I said again, this time with more certainty. His lips parted, and I could barely hear him, but he spoke. "Dad?" The words sent a shock through me, a wave of emotion that nearly overwhelmed me. He remembered me. He knew who I was. I squeezed his hand, my voice shaky with emotion. "I'm here, Ethan. I'm right here." He blinked slowly, and for a moment, I thought he might fall back into unconsciousness. But then, he gave me a faint smile, his lips curving just enough to make it clear he was trying. "I knew you'd be here," he murmured, his voice weak but filled with the smallest hint of relief. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had waited for this moment, prayed for it. And now here it was. Ethan was awake. Slowly, cautiously, I leaned forward, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You're going to be okay," I whispered, though my voice cracked. "We're going to get through this." Anna stood quietly by my side, her hand still resting on mine. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her quiet strength beside me. And for the first time since all of this had started, I truly believed that we would. Ethan was awake, and together, we would face whatever came next. I woke up the next morning to the sound of light rain tapping gently against the window. The sky outside was overcast, and the air felt cooler, but for the first time in days, there was a sense of peace inside me. Ethan was still asleep in the bed across the room, his breathing steady, and I couldn't help but feel a small but profound sense of relief. He was alive. He was still with me. The doctors had come in earlier to check on him, and they confirmed that his condition was stable. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but he had made it through the worst of it. As I sat there, watching him sleep, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led up to this moment. The fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, it all seemed so distant now. But there were still many questions, still so much left to figure out. I had made a promise to Ethan, a promise that I would protect him no matter what. But now that he was awake, the real work was just beginning. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him face this alone. He was my son now, and I would do everything I could to make sure he knew he was safe, that he was loved, that he mattered. The thought of the future was overwhelming, but it was also a little thrilling. We were going to rebuild our lives, to start fresh. It wasn't going to be easy, but we had already come so far. I stood up from my chair and walked over to Ethan's side. I looked down at his peaceful face and smiled. He looked so different from the boy I had found unconscious on the street, broken and vulnerable. Now, he looked like the boy I had always hoped he would become, strong, resilient, and full of potential. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from his forehead. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I sat back down beside him, just watching him, feeling the warmth of the moment. I didn't know how long I stayed there, but it felt like time was standing still. For once, I didn't feel the need to rush, to fix everything. I just wanted to be present, to enjoy the fact that he was here, with me. After a while, Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and he blinked a few times as if adjusting to the light. He turned his head slowly to look at me, and for a moment, I didn't know if he was fully awake or still in a dream. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, but filled with recognition. A wave of emotion hit me, and I felt my heart swell in my chest. "I'm here, Ethan," I said softly. "You're going to be okay." He blinked again and then smiled faintly. It was a small smile, but it was enough to tell me that he was still fighting, still holding on. "I knew you'd be here," he murmured, his voice barely audible. I smiled back, my throat tight. "I promised I would be," I replied. He shifted slightly, wincing a little, and I immediately reached out to adjust his pillow. "How are you feeling?" I asked, my voice gentle. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then shrugged weakly. "Like I've been hit by a truck," he said with a faint laugh, and I couldn't help but chuckle. "You've been through a lot," I said. "But you're strong, Ethan. I know you can get through this." He nodded slowly, and for a moment, there was silence between us. I could see the wheels turning in his head, as if he was trying to make sense of everything that had happened. "Am I going to be okay?" he asked, his voice full of vulnerability. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the boy I had promised to protect. "Yes, you're going to be okay," I said, my voice firm and filled with certainty. "We're going to take this one day at a time, but you're going to get through this. You're not alone." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, and then he nodded again. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. I felt my heart swell at the words. It had been so long since I had felt needed, truly needed, and now here was this boy, this young man, looking to me for strength. And I would give him that strength. I would give him everything I had. The door opened softly, and Anna walked into the room, her face bright with a soft, hopeful smile. She had been by my side through everything, and even though we hadn't talked about it much, I knew she was just as relieved to see Ethan awake as I was. "How's he doing?" she asked quietly, her gaze shifting to Ethan. "He's awake," I said, my voice full of relief. "He's going to be okay." Anna's eyes softened, and she walked over to Ethan's side, her hand resting gently on his arm. "I'm so glad," she said, her voice warm with emotion. Ethan turned his head toward her and smiled faintly. "Thanks for being here," he said, his voice still weak. Anna smiled back, a quiet understanding passing between them. "Of course," she said. "I'll always be here for you." There was something unspoken between them, something that went beyond just being there for each other. It was a bond, one forged in moments of vulnerability and strength. And it made me realize something. No matter what happened, we weren't going through this alone. We had each other, and that was all we needed. The road ahead was uncertain, and there would be challenges we couldn't anticipate. But in that moment, in the quiet of the hospital room, I knew one thing for sure. We would face it together. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hand resting gently on Ethan's. His condition had improved significantly since the night he woke up. The doctors were no longer as concerned, though they had cautioned that his recovery would still take time. But the worst was over. For the first time in weeks, the weight of uncertainty had lifted. Yet, the reality of what had happened, what we had all been through, still lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment when I had first found him, lying unconscious, battered and broken. I had never been so terrified in my life. But now, here he was, alive and slowly recovering. And yet, I still found myself questioning what came next. How would we move forward? What did the future hold? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. I looked up to see Anna standing there, her face pale but filled with a quiet strength that had never wavered. "How's he doing?" she asked softly, her eyes flickering toward Ethan. I smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "Better. The doctors are hopeful. He's still a little weak, but they're optimistic." Anna nodded, her gaze drifting to Ethan's sleeping form. She stepped into the room and sat down beside me. For a moment, we just sat in silence, watching Ethan. There was an unspoken understanding between us. We had both been through so much, and yet, we were still here. Together. I broke the silence first. "I don't know what to do next," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I don't know how to fix everything." Anna looked at me, her expression soft but steady. "You don't have to fix everything," she said gently. "You just have to be here. He needs you. We both do." Her words were simple, but they struck something deep inside me. I had spent so much time trying to control everything, trying to make sure that everything would be okay. But she was right. I didn't have to fix everything. I just had to be present, to show up. "I just don't want to fail him," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't go through losing him. Not after everything." Anna reached out and placed her hand on mine. "You won't fail him," she said with a quiet confidence that I wished I could fully embrace. "You've already done so much. You saved him. That's more than most people would do." I looked at her, her face filled with that quiet strength again. It was like she had an endless well of it. I didn't know how she did it, how she kept going after everything she had been through. But somehow, I found myself believing her. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to keep showing up. Slowly, Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and he turned his head toward us. He looked at Anna first, then me. His eyes were still heavy with sleep, but there was something there, something that told me he was starting to understand where he was, what had happened. "Hey," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "How are you feeling?" Ethan blinked a few times, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Tired," he muttered, his voice rough. but better. I smiled, my heart swelling with relief. That's a good sign. Anna reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. You've been through a lot, she said, her voice gentle. But you're going to be okay. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes focusing more on her than on me. There was something there between them, something unspoken, but I could feel it. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, we would face it together. Ethan was still healing, but so was I. Slowly, piece by piece, we were both learning to move forward. For a long time, I had been terrified of what would happen if things went wrong. But, sitting there, beside Anna and Ethan, I realized something. I couldn't control everything. All I could do was be there, be present, and let the future unfold as it would. I had already promised Ethan that I would protect him, and I would keep that promise. Not with perfection, but with the love and care I had to give. And I knew that love, that promise, was enough. Slowly, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Ethan. Together, we could get through anything. I could feel the tension in the air as the days dragged on, the uncertainty of what was to come hanging like a thick cloud over us. Ethan had shown signs of improvement, small, but significant steps that told me he was fighting. But I knew that the real battle was only just beginning. His recovery wasn't just about physical healing. It was about everything that had happened before, the trauma he'd faced, the world he had known, and how it had changed. I had always been there for him in the physical sense, but now I knew that I had to be there for him emotionally, too. It wasn't just about keeping him alive. It was about helping him live, truly live. The weight of that responsibility weighed on me more with every passing day. Anna was still here, a constant presence in our lives. She had been a steady source of strength for both Ethan and me, and I knew that without her, I would have struggled even more. Her wisdom, her quiet determination, made all the difference. But there were times when I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, too. We were both fighting the unknown together, and I wasn't sure if either of us knew what we were doing. Yet somehow, we kept moving forward. One afternoon, Ethan woke up feeling a little stronger. The nurses had said it was a good sign, but there was still a long road ahead. His mind was still clouded by everything that had happened, and he wasn't ready to talk about it yet. But I could see the questions in his eyes, the way he seemed to be trying to process everything. We were sitting in the small room, just the two of us. Anna had stepped out to grab something, leaving me alone. With Ethan, the silence was comfortable, but it wasn't the kind of silence that filled me with peace. It was the kind that made everything feel a little too heavy. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice weak but clear. "Dad?" he said, glancing at me with a faint, uncertain look. "Yeah," I replied, my heart tightening in my chest. Am I going to be okay?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I had heard it in so many forms before, but hearing him say it so quietly, so vulnerably, made it feel different. I could see the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty about his future. I had spent so many nights lying awake, wondering how to answer that question, knowing that no matter what I said, it would never feel like enough. But I had to try. "You're going to be okay," I said softly, my voice steady. "You've already made it this far, Ethan. You're stronger than you realize. And I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together." He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with those wide, searching eyes. The silence stretched on between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time. I could feel the weight of his gaze, and I knew he was processing everything I had said. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if he was trying to believe it. "Thanks," he whispered, the word barely audible. I smiled, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I'm here because I want to be. You're my son, Ethan. I'm always going to be here." He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back at me. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to move forward." My heart ached for him. I could see how much pain he was in, how lost he felt. But I also saw the strength in him. The strength I had seen from the very beginning. "You don't have to know everything right now," I said gently. "You just have to take it one step at a time. That's all any of us can do. We'll figure it out together." Ethan nodded again, more to himself than to me, as if he was trying to convince himself that he could take that first step. I wanted to believe that he could, that he would, but I knew that it wouldn't be easy. He had been through too much to just heal overnight. But he had already made it this far, and I knew that he had the strength to keep going. After a long pause, Ethan let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing just a little. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll try." I smiled, feeling a small but important weight lift off my shoulders. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't expect him to be okay overnight. I didn't expect everything to magically fix itself. But we had made it through the hardest part. Now, we just had to keep moving forward, step by step. Just then, Anna walked back into the room, carrying a small bag from the coffee shop downstairs. She smiled when she saw that Ethan was awake and looked a little more at ease. "How's it going in here?" she asked, setting the bag down on the table. "Better," Ethan said quietly, offering her a small smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The way he looked at her, like he was finally starting to understand that she wasn't going anywhere, that made my heart swell. We had come a long way, but there was still a long road ahead. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was sure of one thing. Together, we could face anything. I stood outside Ethan's hospital room, my mind racing with everything that had happened in the past few weeks. He was awake now, slowly recovering, but the road ahead was still uncertain. I had promised him that I would protect him, but how could I protect him from the ghosts of his past? How could I protect him from the things that had scarred him, things that he was still too afraid to talk about? I glanced at the door, watching the steady flow of nurses and doctors moving past me, their faces focused and professional. I knew they were doing everything they could, but I still felt like it wasn't enough. My heart ached for him. Ethan had been through so much, and now that he was beginning to heal physically, I could see the emotional scars he was carrying. He wasn't just recovering from an accident. He was recovering from a lifetime of pain and fear. I turned and leaned against the wall, my hand running through my hair as I tried to collect my thoughts. What was I supposed to do? How could I help him when I didn't even know how to help myself? I was lost in thought when Anna approached, her footsteps soft but steady as she walked toward me. She had been with us every step of the way, never once leaving our side. I could always count on her to know what to say, even when I didn't have the words. "How's he doing?" she asked quietly, her voice full of concern. "Better," I said, the words coming out more automatically than I intended. "He's awake. He's strong, but I think it's going to take a while before he's really okay." Anna nodded, understanding in her eyes. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me, her presence a quiet comfort. Finally, she spoke. "You know, healing doesn't always happen in a straight line," she said softly. "There will be days when he seems okay, and days when it feels like all the progress is slipping away. But that doesn't mean he isn't healing. It just means it's going to take time." I looked at her, grateful for her words, but feeling the weight of the truth behind them. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything would work out. But there was a part of me that couldn't help but fear the worst. What if he never fully recovers? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What if he never gets past this? What if he's haunted by everything that's happened forever? Anna turned to face me, her eyes steady and full of quiet strength. "He'll carry those scars with him," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean he can't have a future. That doesn't mean he can't be happy again. You're helping him more than you realize, just by being here." I swallowed hard, her words cutting through the fear and doubt I had been carrying. Maybe I didn't have all the answers, but I could give him something. I could give him my support, my love, and I could stand by him while he found his way. "I'm scared, Anna," I admitted, my voice shaking with the raw honesty I had been too afraid to share. "I'm scared that I'm not enough, that I won't be able to fix everything. I don't know what to do next." Anna placed her hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. "You're enough, more than you know," she said. "You don't have to fix everything. Just be there. That's what matters. You're not alone in this, neither of you are." I nodded slowly, her words sinking in. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of the fear lifting, just a little. Ethan wasn't alone, and neither was I. We had each other. I looked back at the door to Ethan's room, my thoughts swirling with the uncertainty of what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to give up on him. I wouldn't let him face this alone. Anna's hand remained on my shoulder as we stood together, silently sharing the burden of what lay ahead. It wasn't going to be easy, but we would face it, side by side. And that was enough. As we walked into Ethan's room together, I saw him looking at us, his expression tired but hopeful. There was still a long way to go, but in that moment, I knew we were taking the first step toward healing. We weren't sure what the future held, but we were going to find it together, and that gave me more hope than anything else could. Ethan had survived the worst, and now we would help him find the way forward. With Anna by my side and Ethan's strength to guide us, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I sat in the quiet of the living room, the soft hum of the city filtering through the windows, but it felt like the world had stopped moving. Ethan was asleep upstairs, his recovery progressing, but there was still an undeniable tension in the air. Every day, I watched him struggle with things I couldn't always understand. The fear that seemed to take over him at times, the moments when he pulled away, retreating into himself as if trying to protect something deep inside. He was healing, physically at least, but emotionally, that was a different story. The weight of the past, the things he had witnessed, the things he had been forced to endure, still clung to him like a shadow. And I didn't know how to help him face those demons. I ran my hand through my hair, the exhaustion settling in. It wasn't just Ethan who was struggling. I felt it too. The weight of all of it, the responsibility, the pressure, the fear, was starting to wear me down. I had promised him I'd be there, that I'd never leave him. But the longer this went on, the more I started to wonder if I was the one who was broken, the one who couldn't fix anything. I glanced at the clock, the ticking sound almost deafening in the quiet room. It had been hours since Ethan had gone to sleep, and even though I knew he needed rest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the anxiety over his recovery. It was something else, something I couldn't put into words. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps upstairs broke my reverie, followed by the creak of Ethan's bedroom door opening. I froze, holding my breath. I knew that sound. It was him. I stood up quickly, making my way toward the stairs. Before I could even reach the bottom step, I heard his voice. Dad. His voice was quiet, almost tentative, but it was enough to send a rush of warmth through me. Ethan, I called back, my voice steady but with a hint of concern. I hurried up the stairs to find him standing in the hallway, his hand resting on the banister for support. His face was pale, his eyes slightly dazed, but there was a clarity there that hadn't been present before. He was trying to hide it, but I could see the vulnerability in the way he stood, the way he shifted his weight from one leg to the other, as if uncertain of whether he should be standing at all. What are you doing up? I asked, my voice soft but concerned as I walked toward him. He hesitated before answering, his voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to see you. His words hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized just how much this had affected him, how much he needed me to be there. Not just physically, but emotionally. He wasn't just recovering from physical wounds. He was struggling with something deeper, something that had been hidden behind his walls. I reached out, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, you know, I said quietly. I'm here. I'm always here. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to read something I couldn't quite understand. For a moment, there was silence between us. The kind of silence that felt heavy, filled with things unsaid. Finally, he spoke, his voice small but filled with the weight of everything he had been holding inside. I'm scared, he whispered, his eyes dropping to the floor. I don't know how to move on from this. I don't know how to go back to being normal. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on his physical recovery, on the idea of getting him back to health, that I hadn't realized how much the trauma was affecting him. It wasn't just about getting better. It was about healing in ways I couldn't control. I crouched down in front of him, bringing myself to his level, trying to make him feel seen, understood. You don't have to be normal, I said softly. You just have to be you. And right now, you're doing the best you can. That's enough. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with doubt. But what if I'm not strong enough? His voice cracked, the vulnerability so raw I felt my heart ache. You are strong, I said, my voice firm but gentle. You're stronger than you know. And if you ever feel like you're not, I'll be right here, helping you through it. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the fight in his eyes. The hesitation, the uncertainty, the fear that had held him back for so long. But slowly I saw him nod. Just the smallest movement, but it was enough. In that moment, I realized something. We were both healing. It wasn't just him who needed to recover. I did too. We both had scars, both physical and emotional, but together, we would face them. And together, we would find a way to move forward. Ethan leaned into me then, his head resting on my shoulder, And for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the world lighten. Not because the road ahead was easy, but because I knew we weren't facing it alone. The future was still uncertain, but we would take it step by step. And for the first time, I was ready to face it, with Ethan and with Anna by my side. We would get through this together. I stood in the hallway outside Ethan's room, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, trying to ground myself. The days had been a blur of tests, doctors, nurses, and endless moments of uncertainty. Ethan had made remarkable progress, but there were still so many questions about his recovery, about the emotional toll of everything he'd been through. The trauma wasn't something that could be fixed with a few bandages or pills. It was deeper than that. It was the weight of a life he'd had to survive, the fear of losing his own identity, and the constant uncertainty of what came next. I knew that the physical healing was only the beginning. Ethan had a long road ahead of him, and I would be right there with him, every step of the way. But there was another weight I hadn't considered, the weight of the past, the dark truths we had yet to confront. I had promised to protect him, but now I realized that promise wasn't just about keeping him safe in the present. It was about helping him rebuild, helping him trust again, and helping him see that his future wasn't defined by what had happened to him. Just as I was about to turn and go back into Ethan's room, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Anna walking toward me, her eyes tired but determined. She had been through everything with us, never once faltering, always there when we needed her. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for her. "How's he doing?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. I nodded slowly, trying to put my thoughts into words. "Better," I said, my voice a little rough. "He's still not himself yet, but he's getting there. Slowly." Anna studied me for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "And you?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. I felt a sudden lump in my throat. "I'm okay," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "It's just, I don't know. I'm trying to be strong for him, but it's hard. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, trying to protect him from everything, from the past, from himself. I don't know how to fix it." Anna's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You don't have to fix everything," she said quietly. "You've been there for him. That's all you can do right now." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. I knew she was right, but it didn't stop the nagging feeling that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't sure what Ethan needed from me, what anyone needed from me, but I knew that I was supposed to have the answers. And I didn't. I wasn't sure I would ever have all the answers. But maybe I didn't need them. Maybe the key to helping Ethan wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was just about being there for him, showing him that he wasn't alone, no matter how dark things got. I looked at Anna, seeing the quiet strength in her eyes, the way she had supported both of us without hesitation. It gave me hope. Maybe I didn't have all the answers, but I wasn't alone in this. I didn't have to carry the burden by myself. We were in this together, and that made all the difference. "Thanks, Anna," I said quietly, my voice filled with gratitude. She smiled softly, her hand giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Anytime," she said. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything still lingering in the air, but it felt different now. Lighter somehow. "You're doing the right thing," Anna said after a while, breaking the silence. "You're not alone in this. And neither is Ethan." I took a deep breath, the words settling in my chest. It was true. I wasn't alone. Neither of us were. Ethan was still asleep, but I knew that when he woke up, we would be ready for whatever came next. We would face the future together, and no matter how uncertain things seemed, I knew we would make it through. As we headed back into Ethan's room, I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, steady but slow. I sat down beside him, just watching him, trying to push away the worries that had been clouding my thoughts. The future was still unclear, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. We were going to be okay. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. It had been several months since that night, the night when everything changed. Ethan had come so far, physically and emotionally, and while the road to full recovery wasn't over, it was clear he was stronger now than he had ever been before. I watched him as he sat across from me at the dinner table, the weight of his past no longer as heavy on his shoulders. His laughter, though still a little shy, was no longer the forced sound it once was. It was real now, genuine. And that meant more to me than anything else ever could. The house felt different now too. filled with the warmth of life, of hope. Anna had been with us every step of the way, and though the two of us had been uncertain of what our future held, together we had built something that felt solid. The night felt like a moment of peace. The storm had passed, and while I knew we would face more challenges ahead, for the first time in a long time, I believed we could handle them. I caught Anna's eye from across the room, and she gave me a small, knowing smile. She had watched Ethan transform, just as I had. Her faith in him, in us, had never wavered. It had been her quiet strength that had kept me going when I felt like I might break. Ethan looked up from his plate, meeting both of our gazes. His eyes were full of gratitude, but more than that, there was a sense of belonging, a peace that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," he said softly, breaking the silence in the room. The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the understanding that he wasn't alone anymore, that he hadn't been abandoned, that he had a family now. It was a truth that neither of us had known would come to pass, but here we were. "You don't need to thank us," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We're family, Ethan. We've always been family." Anna nodded in agreement, her smile softening as she looked at him. "We're here for you. Always." Ethan's smile grew, and for a moment, I could see the boy I had always hoped he could be. The boy who was no longer trapped in fear, the boy who was learning to believe in himself, in us. He was still healing, still learning how to navigate his new life, but he wasn't alone anymore. And that meant everything. As we finished our dinner, the conversation shifted to lighter things, plans for the weekend, ideas for a future that, while still uncertain, felt a lot less intimidating now. We were planning again, dreaming again, and that was the most healing thing of all. The evening stretched on, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow, to the future. The fear that had gripped me when Ethan was first in the hospital had slowly dissolved, replaced by a quiet confidence that we could face whatever came next. It wasn't going to be easy, but it would be worth it. I watched as Ethan stood up from the table and walked over to the window. He stared out into the night, and I saw a different expression on his face now. It wasn't the sadness or uncertainty that used to cloud his eyes. There was something else there, something hopeful. "You okay?" I asked, stepping up behind him. He nodded, his gaze still fixed on the dark city skyline. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just thinking." I stood beside him, both of us staring out into the night, and I realized that this was our moment. This was the start of a new chapter, one where we didn't have to carry the weight of the past anymore. We were moving forward. Together. Ethan turned to look at me, a small, almost shy smile playing on his lips. "I think I'm ready," he said. "Ready for what?" I asked, a small laugh escaping me. "For whatever comes next," he replied, his voice stronger now, more certain. And in that moment, I knew he meant it. He was ready, and so was I. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. We had come this far, and we would keep going, together. The future might have been uncertain, but one thing was clear. We were not facing it alone. The healing had begun, and it was just the beginning. As we stood there, side by side, looking out at the world that awaited us, I realized that everything we had been through had led us to this moment. And no matter what happened next, I knew we would be okay. Because we were family. And together, we could face anything.